Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be tackling a topic that is, I guess, as old as humanity itself, war.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But we're not just talking about, battles and tactics. We're going kind of deeper, I guess, into the nature of war.
Yeah. We're looking for the essence of it.
Exactly.
How it's changed over time and what shapes its course.
And our guide for this deep dive is Carl von Clausewitz's On War.
Of course, a classic.
Of course, alongside its introduction for some historical grounding as well.
Right. Setting the scene.
Get ready for some aha moments as we uncover how even seemingly small things can dramatically alter the outcome of war.
Yeah, and the introduction to On War actually reveals quite a bit about how warfare itself has changed through the ages because Clausewitz, he was writing in a period of really immense military change, right? He saw firsthand Napoleon's revolutionary approach to warfare.
Yeah, the introduction mentions how war used to be much more limited,
Right.
almost like a game of chess,
Hmm.
with kings and armies making very calculated moves.
Yeah.
But the average person was relatively unaffected.
Yeah, think of it as a siege mentality.
Okay.
Early wars often had these very narrow objectives, like capturing a fortress or, a strategically important piece of land.
Like in the 18th century, wars were primarily fought between governments,
Right.
using the population as tools, I guess, to achieve their goals.
Exactly. But then the French Revolution happened,
Yeah.
and that changed everything. It wasn't just armies clashing anymore.
Right.
It was entire nations engaged in this struggle for survival.
The introduction highlights how Austria and Prussia were totally caught off guard
Yeah.
by the French Revolution.
Yeah, they were trying to fight like this diplomatic war
Right.
against a force fueled by the passion and energy of a whole nation.
Yeah.
Their fervor and, I guess, this nationalistic spirit transformed warfare into what Clausewitz called total war.
Okay.
And it really changed the scale and intensity of conflict.
So this shift really underscores one of Clausewitz's most important concepts.
Yeah,
War is not some isolated event.
right.
It's an extension of political processes,
Exactly.
which brings us to his famous statement, war is an instrument of policy.
Precisely, war is never an end in itself.
Okay.
It always serves political objectives.
So a nation's political goals actually dictate its military strategies and actions.
Absolutely. Think about the Napoleonic Wars, which are discussed in the introduction.
Okay.
Napoleon's political aspirations basically influenced every facet of his campaigns, like his choice of battlefields, his conditions for peace. Even capturing Paris in 1812 wouldn't have guaranteed victory if Napoleon still had a large army at his command.
So the political landscape always has to be considered.
Always.
This raises a really crucial question, though. How much influence should politics have over military decisions?
That's a debate that's been going on for centuries.
Right.
With lots of different approaches and perspectives, Clausewitz himself really believed in this interconnectedness.
Instead of just stating that war is an instrument of policy, though.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of how this plays out in real-world situations? How do political agendas affect things like military strategy, the allocation of resources, even public opinion?
Yeah, you're right. It's much more nuanced than just that phrase. Imagine a government that wants to expand its territory.
Okay.
This political objective might lead them to adopt a really aggressive military strategy,
Okay.
focusing on offensive campaigns, rapid territorial gains.
They might prioritize resource allocation towards the army,
Yeah, exactly, neglecting other sectors.
like education or healthcare,
Yeah, they might even use propaganda to shape public opinion.
to make the war seem necessary.
Exactly, portraying it as essential for national security or even economic prosperity.
So it's not just about, moving troops on a map.
Right.
It's about understanding the motivations behind the whole war effort.
Absolutely. Now, moving beyond the political realm, Clausewitz also delves into the fundamental forces that shape war itself. He introduces this idea of the trinity of war.
Okay.
He describes war as this dynamic interplay
Okay.
between primordial violence,
Okay.
chance,
Hmm?
and rational political direction.
It's a powerful framework.
Yeah, it is. Let's break it down a bit further.
Okay.
You have primordial violence first, which is really linked to our human capacity for aggression and passion. It's that raw, almost instinctual drive towards conflict.
Then you have chance,
Right.
which represents that unpredictability inherent in war, that fog of war where, even carefully crafted plans can be completely derailed by unforeseen events or just sheer luck.
And then finally, you have rational political direction.
Okay.
This is like the guiding intelligence, the strategy that tries to steer the war towards a desired outcome.
It's interesting how these three elements interact, almost like this push and pull
Yeah.
between passion, the unpredictable nature of war, and calculated planning.
Exactly, and it's not just some abstract concept.
Okay.
It's a framework for understanding any conflict.
Not just the ones on the battlefield.
Absolutely. Whether it's navigating a complex negotiation or trying to make sense of a global crisis, understanding this trinity can give you some really valuable insights into the dynamics at work.
Yeah, in a world where conflict seems almost inevitable,
Hmm.
that kind of insight can be incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. It can help us make more informed decisions and navigate those challenges more effectively.
So moving from the broader forces at play to some specific strategies,
Yeah.
Clausewitz also tackles the dynamic between attack and defense.
This leads us to the age-old question. Is it better to strike first or wait for your opponent to make a move?
Right.
Clausewitz analyzed the benefits and drawbacks of both,
Okay.
and he found that defense has certain inherent advantages.
Can you elaborate on those? Why is defense considered more favorable?
Well, for one, it's simply easier to hold ground than to take it. The defender has the benefit of time familiarity with the terrain, the opportunity to fortify their position.
Hmm.
They can dig in set traps and make the attacker pay a heavy price.
Okay, so you're forcing the attacker to fight on your terms in a location where you have the upper hand.
Exactly, but that doesn't mean warfare is just the static thing.
Right.
That's where the concept of the culminating point of victory comes in.
Okay.
Even a successful offensive reaches a point where its momentum just kind of
Wanes.
wanes, yeah, and it becomes vulnerable.
Like a wave crashing on the shore.
Exactly. It builds and builds, but eventually it breaks and recedes.
Can you give some concrete examples of how this culminating point of victories has played out in history?
Sure, one of the most famous examples is Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812.
Okay.
Initially, Napoleon's Grande Armée was very successful. They achieved significant victories and advanced deep into Russia.
But
But several factors contributed to the culmination of their offensive: the vast distances, the logistical challenges, the scorched earth tactics employed by the Russians, and of course the brutal Russian winter.
of course,
All these things drained Napoleon's forces, turning their initial triumph into a catastrophic retreat.
it's a really powerful example of how even a seemingly unstoppable force can reach its limits.
Exactly.
It really underscores the importance of considering all the potential challenges and risks before going on the offensive.
Precisely. And it highlights the strategic importance of understanding not just your own strengths, but also the limitations and vulnerabilities that can arise even when you're attacking.
This discussion of the culminating point of victory is fascinating.
Yeah.
And it really highlights, I guess, the strategic depth of Clausewitz's work.
Absolutely. And it brings us to another crucial aspect of warfare that he emphasizes: the human element.
War isn't just about numbers, weapons, and technology.
Right.
It's about the people involved, the soldiers, the leaders, even the civilians.
Exactly. It's about understanding the psychological forces that drive them.
Right.
Clausewitz was keenly aware of how these less tangible factors could be decisive in the outcome of any conflict. He identified three key elements
Okay.
that shape this human dimension of war: friction, military genius, and moral forces.
Let's start with friction. What did Clausewitz mean by that term?
Imagine you've planned this brilliant military maneuver, every detail meticulously accounted for.
Okay.
But then on the battlefield, things start to unravel.
Right.
Miscommunication disrupts your formations, unexpected terrain slows your advance, the weather turns against you. These seemingly minor details, these unforeseen hiccups, that's what Clausewitz calls friction. It's the difference between war on paper and war in reality. The fog, the exhaustion, the miscommunication, the unexpected delays, the sheer terror and chaos of combat.
Right.
All these things create friction that can grind even the best plans to a halt.
So even with all the technological advancements we've made,
Yeah,
the fundamental challenges of uncertainty and unforeseen circumstances remain.
absolutely. Friction is inherent in the complex and chaotic nature of war.
So if friction is inevitable, how do you overcome it? What does it take to succeed in such a challenging environment?
That's where military genius comes into play.
Okay.
For Clausewitz, military genius isn't just about devising brilliant strategies. It's about being adaptable, decisive, and able to maintain your composure in the middle of chaos.
Right.
It's about navigating that fog of war and making critical judgments with limited information.
But wouldn't that imply that relying solely on defense, like we talked about earlier, could be detrimental? If a commander's always reacting to the enemy's actions, wouldn't they risk becoming trapped in a passive position and losing the initiative?
That's a perceptive observation.
Okay.
Clausewitz recognized that while defense has its advantages, it also carries the risk of passivity.
Right.
That's why he emphasized the importance of what he called active defense.
Okay.
This involves seeking opportunities to counterattack and seize the initiative even when you're defending. It's about knowing when to absorb blows and when to strike back.
Okay.
Leveraging the advantages of defense while staying dynamic and adaptable.
This idea of active defense adds another layer of complexity to that attack-defense dynamic.
Yeah.
It suggests that effective warfare requires a nuanced understanding of both approaches and the ability to transition between them seamlessly.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance between exploiting the strengths of defense and capitalizing on opportunities to shift the momentum in your favor.
This is a great transition into the third element of Clausewitz's Trinity. Moral forces. Could you delve a little bit into what he meant by this concept and why it's so crucial in warfare?
Sure, moral forces encompass those intangible factors that affect the will to fight. National sentiment, troop morale, the strength of leadership belief in a cause, fear, even hatred.
Okay.
Clausewitz argued that these moral forces could be just as impactful as physical forces, sometimes even more so.
History is full of examples where seemingly weaker forces fueled by these strong moral forces have overcome significant material disadvantages.
Absolutely. Take, for example, the American Revolution.
Okay.
The American colonists were facing the might of the British Empire. They were outmatched in terms of resources, manpower, military experience.
Right.
But their unwavering belief in themselves, their commitment to liberty, their strong leadership under figures like George Washington,
Yeah.
all of that fueled their determination and ultimately led to their victory.
It's amazing how deeply these moral forces can influence the course of a war,
Yeah.
and how sometimes the side with the stronger conviction and sense of purpose can prevail against seemingly impossible odds.
It's a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.
So we've covered the first three core tenets of Clausewitz's On War. War as an instrument of policy, the trinity of war, and the interplay of attack and defense.
Right.
But we've got more to unpack, especially on the human element and how this all applies to war in the 21st century. Let's dive into that in part 2 of this deep dive.
Sounds good.
So we just finished exploring some pretty foundational concepts from Clausewitz, like war is an extension of politics, the interplay of attack and defense, and
Right.
the significant role of the human element in war.
Yeah.
But how do these ideas developed centuries ago apply to the complexities of modern warfare?
That's the question, isn't it?
Right.
That's what military strategists and scholars are still trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Clausewitz was writing during a time of armies clashing on fields, with cannons and cavalry charges.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, how much of that translates to an age of drones, cyber warfare, global terrorism.
It almost seems like we're operating in a completely different realm of conflict.
The tools and tactics have definitely evolved,
Yeah.
but it's fascinating how many of the fundamental principles Clausewitz outlined still hold true.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Walk me through how these age-old concepts still apply in modern warfare.
Let's take friction, for example.
Okay.
Clausewitz talked about the fog of war, unexpected delays, and the difficulties of coordinating large armies.
Right.
Now imagine trying to manage a drone strike on the other side of the world. Think of all the potential for technological glitches, intelligence failures, the risk of unintended consequences.
It seems like friction, in a way, has actually become even more complex in the modern era.
Yeah.
We might have advanced technology,
Right.
but we've also introduced new layers of complexity and potential for things to go wrong.
Absolutely. And what about moral forces?
Right.
We discussed how crucial troop morale and leadership are in traditional warfare.
Right.
We'll consider the war on terror.
But-
It's not just about bombs and bullets anymore.
Right.
It's about winning hearts and minds, countering extremist ideologies, and building alliances.
So the battlefield is expanded.
Yeah.
It's not just a physical space. It's also the global information space, social media, the battle for public opinion.
Precisely. And then there's Clausewitz's idea of people's war.
Yeah.
We see non-state actors like terrorist groups using those same guerrilla tactics he described, using their knowledge of local terrain and their ability to blend in with the population to their advantage.
It's sobering to see how those strategies, often associated with less technologically advanced forces,
Yeah.
can still be so effective in the 21st century.
It is, but here's the crucial point. Understanding these principles can help us to better counter them.
Okay, so Clausewitz gives us this framework.
Yeah,
Not just for waging wars, but for understanding the nature of conflict itself, regardless of the era, or the
exactly.
specific tools involved.
That's why his work is still so valuable.
Right.
Now, shifting from general principles to more specific applications, let's look at what Clausewitz said about strategy and tactics that's still relevant today.
Okay.
One of the key takeaways from On War is that there's no universal approach to warfare.
Okay.
Every conflict is unique,
Right.
and the best strategy depends on the specific circumstances.
So no guaranteed paths to victory?
Right, no one-size-fits-all solutions.
Clausewitz really emphasized the importance of adaptability and flexibility in warfare.
He did a skilled commander has to adjust their plans based on what's happening on the ground.
It seems like being able to think on your feet and make quick decisions even amidst all the chaos
Yeah.
is more crucial now than ever.
Absolutely, the pace of operations has increased
Yeah.
exponentially,
Right.
and the consequences of mistakes can be far more significant.
Clausewitz also advocated for concentrating your forces at the decisive point
He did.
and advised against dividing your forces unless absolutely necessary.
It's about focusing your power where it will have the greatest impact.
So instead of dispersing your resources,
Right.
you focus everything on one crucial objective.
Exactly. Imagine planning a cyber attack.
Okay?
Instead of spreading your resources thin across multiple targets, you might concentrate all your efforts on one high-value target,
Right.
like a critical piece of infrastructure.
That's a good illustration of how this principle translates to a modern context.
Yeah,
Now, we talked earlier about the advantages of defense,
we did.
but Clausewitz also recognized that both attack and defense are essential.
Absolutely, a skilled commander needs to be proficient in both.
As we mentioned, one of the key advantages of defense is the relative ease of holding ground compared to taking it.
Right, the defender has time on their side, familiarity with the terrain, the opportunity to fortify their position.
But isn't the emphasis on defense in Clausewitz's work somewhat outdated in today's world? With all the rapid technological advancements and preemptive strikes,
Okay.
it seems like the ability to strike quickly and decisively, even across great distances,
Yeah.
has become more paramount.
That's a valid point, and it's definitely something to consider when applying Clausewitz's ideas to the modern era.
Right.
Technology has changed the dynamics of warfare, making preemptive strikes and rapid offensive operations much more feasible.
Yeah.
However, the core principles of defense are still relevant. Even in a world of drones and cyber warfare, securing and holding key positions is still crucial.
Okay.
And the concept of defense extends beyond just physical territory.
Right.
In cyber warfare, for instance, defense could involve protecting critical infrastructure from attacks, implementing robust cybersecurity measures, or developing counter-strategies.
So it's not about clinging to these outdated notions of defense.
Right.
But about adapting those principles to the new realities of modern warfare.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even in an age of rapid strikes and technological dominance, the ability to protect and secure what's vital is still essential.
Now, moving back to offensive operations,
Yeah,
one of their primary advantages is the potential for a decisive victory.
right. A successful offensive can cripple enemy forces, capture vital territory, and bring a swift end to the conflict.
It's about dictating the terms of engagement and seizing the initiative.
Precisely, however, attack also has its downsides. One of the biggest risks is the potential for high costs.
Okay.
Offensive operations require a lot of resources, manpower, logistical support.
You're putting your troops in a more vulnerable position,
Yeah.
relying on supply lines to keep them equipped and moving.
Exactly, and if those supply lines get disrupted or the offensive stalls, you can end up in a very precarious situation, vulnerable to counterattacks.
And history is full of examples where overextending your reach can lead to disaster.
Absolutely, and that's what Clausewitz was talking about with the culminating point of victory.
Right.
It's that point where an offensive loses its momentum and becomes increasingly susceptible to counterattack.
Right.
It's a reminder that even a successful attack can backfire if it's not managed carefully.
So it's a delicate balance.
It is.
Weighing the potential for a decisive victory against the risks of overextending yourself and becoming vulnerable.
Exactly. Clausewitz emphasized how important meticulous planning is for any offensive operation. This includes evaluating the potential risks, having contingency plans, and a clear exit strategy if things go wrong.
Right.
He also recognized that there are different types of attacks,
Okay.
each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
What are some examples of those different types of attacks?
Well, there's the frontal assault,
Okay.
which is a direct head-on attack using overwhelming force.
Right.
This can be very effective if you have a significant advantage over your opponent.
Like a numerical or technological advantage.
Right? It's about brute force basically overwhelming the enemy through sheer power.
But I imagine this approach can also be incredibly costly.
It can be. Even if you achieve a breakthrough, the losses you sustain might make it difficult to keep the offensive going.
And it could demoralize your troops.
Yeah, and weaken your overall position.
So what are some other attack strategies?
Well, there's the flanking attack,
Okay.
where you target the enemy's flanks, their sides, aiming to exploit their vulnerabilities and outmaneuver them.
This seems like a more strategic approach,
It is.
focused on finding and exploiting weaknesses rather than just relying on brute force.
Exactly. A well-executed flanking attack can disrupt the enemy's defenses and potentially win the battle.
But it requires a lot of planning and coordination.
It does, and often an element of deception. You need to hide your intentions, move your forces into position undetected, and strike at the right moment.
It's a high-risk, high-reward maneuver.
Yeah, it demands a great deal of skill and precision.
Are there other attack strategies beyond just frontal and flanking maneuvers?
Yes, there's also the encirclement attack.
Okay.
This aims to surround the enemy, cut off their escape routes, and trap them. This can be really effective, potentially forcing the enemy to surrender or allowing you to destroy them piecemeal.
It sounds like a devastating tactic.
It can be, but it's also very challenging to execute. It requires a high degree of coordination, maneuverability, and firepower. You need to move your forces quickly and decisively and maintain a tight perimeter around the enemy to stop them from breaking out.
So encirclement is usually only an option if you have a substantial military advantage.
Yeah.
And can outmaneuver your opponent on multiple fronts.
Exactly, and these are just a few examples of the different attack strategies that Clausewitz explored.
Right.
His work really highlights the depth of thought and strategic complexity involved in warfare.
It's fascinating how these strategies developed centuries ago still resonate with the challenges of modern warfare.
Yeah.
It speaks to the timeless nature of strategic thinking and the importance of understanding those core principles of conflict.
Absolutely, and it reinforces Clausewitz's emphasis on studying military history.
Huh.
Learning from the successes and failures of past commanders can provide invaluable insights
Right.
that can be applied to contemporary challenges.
So we've covered strategy, tactics, attack, defense. It's been a lot.
Yeah.
Is there anything else from On War that you think is particularly relevant for understanding conflict in the 21st century?
I think one of Clausewitz's most important observations, especially relevant today, is the role of uncertainty in warfare.
Okay.
He argued that war is inherently unpredictable. There are so many variables at play, so many unknowns,
Right.
that it's impossible to predict the outcome with any certainty.
That's a sobering thought,
It is.
especially given the complexities of modern warfare with all its advanced technologies and interconnected systems.
Right.
It seems like the potential for unforeseen consequences and unintended escalation has only grown.
Precisely. You can have the most carefully crafted plans,
Yeah.
but things rarely go exactly as you expect.
Right.
The enemy might do something unexpected, intelligence might be faulty. Your own troops might make mistakes. There are so many factors that can disrupt your plans and force you to adapt.
It highlights the importance of being prepared for the unexpected,
Yeah,
of being flexible in your thinking and decision-making.
absolutely.
But how do you prepare for the unknown? How do you develop that kind of adaptability in a field as high stakes as warfare?
That's where what Clausewitz called coup d'oeil comes in.
Okay.
The ability to grasp the situation on the battlefield intuitively, to see the big picture amidst the chaos and fog of war, and to make decisive judgments based on often limited information.
It sounds almost like a sixth sense.
Yeah.
A blend of experience, instinct, and strategic brilliance.
It is, in a way. It's that rare ability to see beyond the immediate chaos and understand the underlying dynamics of the situation, to anticipate the enemy's moves and exploit fleeting opportunities. It's something that's honed through years of experience, constant study, and a deep understanding of the principles of war.
So it's not something you can just learn from a textbook.
Right. It's a skill developed through knowledge practice and a certain degree of innate talent.
It's part art, part science,
Yeah.
and a testament to the complexity of warfare.
It reminds us that war is this constant dance between the rational and the irrational, the predictable and the unpredictable.
Yeah.
And that human judgment, informed by experience and guided by strategic principles, is at the heart of it all.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
We started by exploring how war has evolved from these limited conflicts to this idea of total war. And then we delved into Clausewitz's concept of war as an instrument of policy.
Right.
And then we examined how relevant his insights on strategy, tactics, and the human element are in conflict.
And even how those ideas developed centuries ago can apply to the complex landscape of 21st century warfare.
Yeah, with all its technological advancements and these new forms of conflict,
Absolutely.
it's been fascinating.
It has.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, Clausewitz's work is so rich and layered.
Yeah, there's always more to discover,
It's a book you can keep coming back to
right?
and always find something new.
Before we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah,
what's one key takeaway from Clausewitz that you think everyone should really understand?
that's a tough one.
Yeah,
There's so many.
so many insights.
But if I had to pick just one,
Hmm.
I'd say it's his emphasis on the inherent complexity and unpredictability of war.
Right, there are no easy answers, no guaranteed formulas for victory.
Exactly. And that's really important today
Mhm.
because we're constantly bombarded with these simplistic narratives and quick fixes for really complex global problems.
There's a tendency to oversimplify.
Yeah, to think that technology or just overwhelming force will solve everything.
But Clausewitz shows us that war is messy
It's chaotic.
and deeply influenced by human emotions, motivations, and miscalculations.
Absolutely. And those human factors can be way harder to predict and control than any weapon or technology.
So instead of searching for this, magical formula for winning,
Yeah.
we need to approach war with humility,
Right.
recognizing that we don't know everything.
Exactly. And being prepared for the unexpected.
The inevitable uncertainties and unexpected turns that conflict always brings,
Precisely.
that perspective is so important today.
Absolutely as relevant now as it was back then.
And it underscores how relevant Clausewitz's work is for anyone who wants to understand conflict,
Mm.
whether it's in international relations, business negotiations, even personal disputes.
It's all connected.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Carl von Clausewitz and the nature of war.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep exploring this fascinating and challenging subject.
Yeah. On War is a book that can really change how you see the world
It
and
can.
how you navigate those inevitable conflicts that come up.
Until next time, keep those strategic minds sharp.